Welcome to another video lecture by Utkalp Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to learn about electromagnetic induction. The important topics from this chapter include the basics of electromagnetic induction, methods to produce induced EMF, self-inductance, mutual inductance, inductors in series and parallel, energy of inductors, transformers, and RL DC circuits. We start off our lesson by talking about the basics of electromagnetic induction. The first topic that I want to introduce here is the magnetic flux. The magnetic flux, which is linked with a surface held in a magnetic field, is defined as the number of magnetic lines of force crossing that area. So if you can see this diagram, you will see that there is a magnetic field B in the region. You have a surface given by this disk, and you have that there is a area vector A which is perpendicular to the surface and acting to outwards. What we find is the net number of magnetic flux or the net flux in the system is equal to the number of magnetic lines of force passing through the area, and to do that we use the simple formula, which is a dot product of my magnetic field and the area vector, which turns out to be BA into cos theta. Okay, this is the first important formula that you should remember from here. Okay, we should also talk about something known as the flux linkage. So if a coil has more than one turn, then the flux through the whole coil is the sum of the fluxes through the individual turns. So if I have one coil, okay, a coil with one turn, then my flux will be nothing but B into A into cos theta as shown. But if I have a coil with n number of turns, then my net flux is equal to n times BA cos theta. Okay, so you should keep this in mind while doing any of the questions. You should also note that magnetic lines of force are imaginary, but magnetic flux is a real scalar physical quantity and it has dimensions of its own. So what are the dimensions of flux? The dimensions of flux are the dimensions of magnetic field into area, which turn out to be ml2 t minus 2 a minus 1. You should take a note of the dimensions as well. Then there are several things that you should talk about, or at least remember. The first one is the thing that I've told you about right now, the magnetic flux through n coils. The second thing that I mentioned here is the Gauss law for magnetism. When you integrate B over a surface, over a closed surface, we find that the value is 0. This is because magnetic monopoles do not exist in nature. So for the electrical case, you had that your E dot ds was equal to Q by epsilon naught. However, for the magnetic case, you don't have anything of this sort. Next, we quickly talk about the Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction. What is magnetic induction? You are trying to induce an EMF in a system or in a coil or in a conductor by changing the magnetic flux that is passing through the coil or through the conductor. Okay, so this is the basic principle. And how is that done? Faraday actually did some experiments, and we'll just quickly summarize the results of the experiments. So what it did was, he placed a coil with a galvanometer, but no current flowing in the coil on one side, and then he tried to bring in the magnet close to it and take it away from it, or just keep it stationary, and he wanted to find out what happens to the galvanometer's readings. So in the first case, when he just kept the magnet stationary close to it or inside it, he found that there is no deflection, so there was no current induced in the coil. In the second case, when he tried to bring in the magnet with a velocity v and the north pole was kept towards the magnet, then what happened? He found that there was current induced in the coil and the deflection was to the right, or a positive deflection was there. Similarly, when he tried to move the north pole away, he found out that the deflection was to the left and the current was still induced. when he tried to bring the south pole towards the coil, he found that the deflection in the galvanometer is towards the left, and it is opposite to the condition that we had when we were bringing in the north pole. In the final case, he tried to bring in the magnet at twice its speed, and he found that the deflection was in the same side, but the magnitude of the deflection was more. Given these experiments, he proposed two laws. So the Faraday's first law says that whenever the amount of magnetic flux linked with a closed circuit changes, an EMF is induced in the circuit. Okay, and this induced EMF lasts so long as the change in the magnetic flux continues. The second law, which is basically gives the mathematical description of the same thing, okay, says that the magnitude of the EMF induced in the closed circuit is directly proportional to the rate of change of magnetic flux linked with the circuit. Okay, so if there is only one coil in the circuit, I can write this down as EMF is equal to minus d phi by dt. For n coils, it becomes n times this thing. Now you should have a question that why is there a negative sign involved here? This is where the Lenz's law comes in. So the Lenz's law says that the EMF which will be induced by the electromagnetic induction will oppose the cause which produced it. Okay, so it will always oppose the cause which produced it. So let me give you some basic examples to see how this happens. So let me just make a simple coil for you, okay, of 1 turn, and let me try to bring a magnet towards it. Okay, so as you know, I have magnetic lines of force here. There are lines of force like this, lines of force like this, right? So when the magnet is held stationary, we have, let's say 3, 4, 5, let's say we have 5 lines passing through it. Okay, actually there are millions of lines passing through it, but we have just based on this diagram, I'm saying let's say 5 lines are passing through the coil at this time. So according to these 5 lines, I will have a magnetic flux linked with the circuit, because the flux was just given as the B dot A. Okay, now if I try to move the north pole towards the circuit, what will happen? I'll just relatively write what is happening. So my ring will reach somewhere here, but now when the ring has reached here, how many lines are passing through the ring now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines are passing through it. So the number of lines passing through the circuit surface has increased. Because this thing has increased, we know that by this formula, the total flux linked with the coil has increased. Okay, so what does this mean? There is a change in the flux with a change in time. Okay, it's not equal to 0. That is why there is a EMF induced in the coil. Now due to the EMF, there is a current induced in the coil, but how do you find the direction of the current? Okay, the direction of the current will tell you about the direction of the EMF as well. So if this was my coil and I was bringing in the north pole, so what was happening? The number of field lines were increasing from, let's say, from 5 to 9. So if the number of field lines passing through the loop is increasing, from the right hand thumb rule we know that if I have a current in this direction, okay, then I can place my thumb in the direction of the current and curl my fingers. That will tell me where the direction of the lines of magnetic force are due to this circuit. So due to this coil, if I assume that the current is in this direction, then if I place my thumb in the direction of current and I curl my fingers, I'll see that the magnetic lines due to this are in this direction. They are passing through it. Okay, and they are actually in the same direction if my north pole was coming in towards it, so basically if my current is in the direction that is assumed like this, then the number of lines that are entering it increases, so the flux linked with this increases in the same direction. Okay, now let's consider the other case when the current is in the opposite direction. When the current is in the opposite direction, what you see is there are magnetic field lines coming out of the plane. Okay, now with this in mind, we just apply the Lenz's law. So when I try to move my magnet towards the system, because the north pole is going in, so number of field lines that are entering the system due to this will increase, due to the velocity will increase. Okay, because this is increasing, we want the EMF to be induced so that this opposes the increase in the number of field lines entering. So my current will be induced in this direction, so that there are, due to the induced current, the field lines are in this direction, which balance whatever extra change is being done in the magnetic flux. Similarly, if I have a coil like this and I am taking this away, if I am taking the north south pole away, what happens is, let's say initially it had 9 lines of forces passing through it. Now because it is moving away, then there are only 5 lines of forces passing through it based on whatever I drew here. Okay, so I can draw it here as well. So that implies that if I try to move this away with a velocity v, then my ring will reach some time after a time t somewhere here. So the net number of field lines in it will decrease, because there is a decrease in the flux in the coil. What will happen is the current will be induced in this way so that it can increase the field lines that were already there. Okay, so it will try to oppose whatever change in flux you are giving to the coil. Now changes can flux can happen through various reasons. As you saw, it's equal to B dot A. Okay, so you can vary either the magnetic field, which we were doing in this experiment. You can vary the area of the coil, and you can even vary the this is B A cos theta, right? So you can even vary this angle theta between B and A vector. With this in mind, let's quickly look at the induced electric field. So because of the Faraday's laws and the Lenz's law, I can easily say that the closed integral of E dot dl, or the closed line integral, is nothing but the EMF induced is equal to minus d phi by dt. So I should ask you to make a very small note of this, because this is sometimes asked in the examination in some of the questions. Okay, what you should note about this is the line integral of E around a closed path is not 0. Okay, we saw that this is not conservative in nature. Also, when a charge Q goes once around the loop, the total work done on it by the electrical field will be equal to Q times the total EMF. Okay, you should also know that this equation that I have written here, this equation will be valid only if the path around which we integrate is stationary. Okay, so the major things are the ones that I just told you about. But the first, this force being non-conservative, or this field being non-conservative. Okay, and this is not similar to the ones that are produced by stationary charges. But you should note that even for this electric field, the equation F is equal to QE is valid. With this in mind, let's start our discussion about the methods used to produce or used to induce EMF in a system. So EMF can be induced by various things. First is by changing the B, because EMF is d phi by dt and phi is equal to B into A, B dot A. So you can change the B, you can change the area, you can change the relative orientation of A and B. Note that when I talk about area, I am talking about the area that is having the magnetic field going through it. We'll look at it what this means later. We can change the relative orientation of A and B, and we can do it using something known as the motional EMF. So let's first look at uh, one of the favorite problems of all the examiners, which is induced EMF by changing the area of the coil. So I've given a diagram here in front of you, and I'll expect you to look at it carefully. So what do you see in the diagram? You see that there is a U-shaped frame of wire given by PQRS. Okay, and I place this in a uniform magnetic field B, which is perpendicular to the plane, and it is vertically inward. Then I placed a wire Mn of length L on this frame. The wire Mn will move with the velocity V in the direction that I have shown. So it's moving in the right side. I'll zoom in so that you can get a better picture. Okay. Now this is moving with the velocity v in the right direction. So after some time dt or small time dt, the wire will reach to a position m prime n. So initially it was at mn, okay, and finally it reaches a position m prime and n prime after some time dt, and in this time it covers a distance, total distance dx. Now I need to find the change in the area. So the change in the area delta A is nothing but uh, change in area is given by the length travel, which is delta x, into uh, the change in the distance travel delta x into L, which is already fixed. Okay, and we know that the change in the magnetic flux linked with the loop in this time dt. So in this time dt, what is happening? There is a small change in area which is equal to dx times L. Okay, and we have that d phi is nothing but b dot L dx. Okay, because the magnetic field is kept fixed here, we are only changing the area. Okay, with this in mind, I can easily find the induced EMF. Okay, so the induced EMF is d phi by dt. Okay, is equal to b L into dx by dt, but dx by dt is equal to v. So this gives me the term as EMF is equal to b into L into v. You should note that this will come again when we talk about the motional EMF, but right now the area is changing. Now we have provided a resistance here as well in this circuit. So if the resistance of the circuit is R and the circuit is closed, then there will be a current through the circuit. So what will be the current through the circuit? It will be epsilon by whatever resistance we have chosen, is equal to BVL by R. Okay. Now what happens is due to this current, there will be a magnetic force which acts on the conductor in the opposite direction of the velocity. Okay. So the force is nothing but I into L into B. Okay, force that is acting on the conductor because a current is flowing through it. We saw this in the chapter on magnetic effects of current. So when placed in an external magnetic field, a force will act on it, and this is nothing but B square L square V by R. Okay, with this in mind, if we want to move the conductor with the constant velocity v, which we were trying to do, okay, we need to an equal and opposite force F has to be applied by the conductor. So we see that F is equal to the force that you have to apply is equal to B square L square V by R. Okay, now you can even find different. First of all, you should make note of some of these quantities. First of all, the note of the force on the conductor. You should also note the EMF. Okay, the next thing that I want to write about is the power applied. So what is power? Power is the rate at which work is done by the applied force. So P is equal to F dot V. P is equal to F dot V, and we already know the force. So it comes out to be B square L square V square by R. and there is a rate of dissipation of in the circuit as well because of the resistance. So I have P applied as this, and P which is dissipated, PD is equal to I square R. But we already know what the I is. If we just substitute, I find that PVL by R whole square into R is equal to B square L square V square by R. So what did we find? That the power that is applied, the power of the applied force is equal to the power that is dissipated in the circuit due to the resistance R. Okay. So what we can do is we can just replace our figure by a simpler one that I have kept here. So there is a force applied on the conductor, and then you need to apply Fm on it to there is a force, sorry, there is the force of magnetic field on the conductor, and then you, in order to keep it moving, you need to apply force F there. Okay. And in this figure that I have shown you, I can easily replace the moving rod by a battery of EMF BVL. Okay, so I can easily change this to this quantity. Thus, I can write the current in the system to be equal to I is equal to the EMF induced divided by R plus small r is nothing but BVL divided by R plus small r. Note that the direction of the current that is there in the system will be influenced by how the motion is being processed. If my rod is going to the right side, so you have to apply V cross L. Okay, so the cross product of these will give me the direction of the force. Okay, so if my V is in the right side and the field is going into the paper, so I have that the force on my electrons, sorry, the force on a positive charge will be like this. Okay, so what will happen is, let me just tell you what happens inside the rod. So if this is my rod, okay, it's made up of electrons. Now when this is moving with the speed v on this side, and there is a magnetic field into the paper, then what will happen? A force F will be there in this direction. Okay, now this force is on positive carriers, so you have electrons that are the carriers in the system, so the electrons will tend to move in this direction. Okay, now when the electrons move in this direction, what will this mean? This means that there will be a buildup of, like, this will become a positively charged end, and this will become a negatively charged end. Okay, that is why when I replace this with a battery, the upper end is positive and the lower is negative. What if we were having a condition in which my velocity of the rod was in the other direction? Let's say the velocity was in this direction. So what will happen here is, if the velocity is in this direction and magnetic field is inside the plane, then by using this equation, I can easily find the force on the charge carriers. So my force is in the downwards direction for positive charges. So for electrons will be pushed in this direction. This will lead to a negative on the top and the positive on the bottom, and this will lead to a cell like this in the system. Okay, this should be noted every time you try to write the equivalent diagram for this. Let us look at a question to clarify the concepts that we've been reading about. So two parallel rails with negligible resistance are 10 centimeter apart. Okay, they are connected by a 5 ohm resistor. The circuit also contains two metal rods having a resistance of 10 ohm and 15 ohm respectively, as is shown in this figure. Okay, the rods are pulled from the resistor at the constant speeds of 4 meter per second and 2 meter per second respectively. A uniform magnetic field of magnitude 0.01 Tesla is applied perpendicular to the plane of the rails. Determine the current in the 5 ohm resistor. So this is your 5 ohm resistor. This rod is being pulled by 2 meter per second, and the other rod is being pulled by 4 meter per second. Note that here the area of the loop will be changing, so that will induce an EMF in the cells. Let's just see what happens. So two conductors are moving in a uniform magnetic field, so motional EMF will induce across them. Now the rod AB, which is this rod, the rod AB will act as a source of EMF. So let me call that EMF E1. It will be equal to B into V into L is equal to 0.01 into 4 into 0.1. Okay. Similarly, it has the internal resistance, which is given by 10 ohm. This is already given in the question. Now the rod EF, so this is for the rod AB. For the rod EF, there will be again EMF which will be equal to E2 is equal to 0.01 into 2.0 into 0.1. Okay, and the R2 resistance for this is equal to 15 ohms. And this in the question, I can first of all just write this down as 4 into 10 to the power minus 3 volts, and this E2 turns out to be 2 into 10 to the power minus 3 volts. Okay, now I can first of all redraw this diagram as follows. I have A here, then I have a internal resistance, I have a cell, this has a EMF E1, this has a resistance R1, then it goes here, then you have a resistance R. Okay, this is point C, then this is point E, then this is a cell again, then there is a resistance, and you connect it using this. Okay, this E2, this is R2. Okay, with this in the question. Now from the right hand rule, we know that VB is greater than VA and VE is greater than VF. Also it's given that R is equal to 5 ohm. Okay, so that implies my equivalent E is nothing but E1 R2 minus E2 R1 divided by R1 plus R2, which is nothing but 6 into 10 to the power minus 3 minus 20 into 10 to the power minus 3 divided by 15 plus 10, which can be written as 40 by 25 into 10 to the power minus 3, which is nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 3 volts. Okay, now I can similarly find the REQ, which is nothing but 15 into 10 by 15 plus 10. So this is 150 by 25, which is nothing but 6 ohms. Okay, and you can find the current as well. So I'll just write what the current is. The current is nothing but EEQ divided by REQ plus R, as you can see in the diagram here. Okay, oh sorry, this diagram. With this in mind, I can easily write this as 1.6 divided by 11 into 10 to the power minus 3 is equal to 8 by 55 into 10 to the power minus 3 ampere from D to C. D to C. Okay. Next, we talk about motional EMF from Lorentz force. So the principles behind this is similar to the principle that I had when I was explaining to you what happens inside the rod when we are trying to move it in a magnetic field. So what happens in motional EMF is we try to move the conductor with the velocity v inside a magnetic field, and this leads to the generation of an EMF inside the conductor. Now if there is a circuit attached to this conductor, then there will be a current in that conductor as well, or in that entire circuit as well. So what is this based on? It's based on a simple property of force, magnetic force, which is given by V cross B dot dl. Okay, so as explained to me earlier, if I have a rod which is moving with a velocity v, and there is a, let's say this time we have the magnetic field that is outside, so by using the cross product here I can easily see that my force is in the, if P is this, so let me just find the force uh, using the cross product. So I have force here, so force is in the downwards direction. I took this much time because I was myself applying the cross product and trying to find the direction of force. So force is in this direction, that implies the force on positive charges is in this direction. Okay, now the force on the electrons will be in the opposite direction, so the electrons will try to accumulate near this end, and the positive charges will, this will become positive, this will become negative. Okay, and due to this there will be a flow of current in the circuit in this direction, and inside the cell like this. Okay, sorry, inside the cell we need to make it properly. This is the current in the circuit. These questions will be used whenever you want to find, when you're given a linear velocity or you're trying to rotate a rod or a disc inside a magnetic field. So motional EMF will come into play, but all you need to remember is the quantity, which is this. Okay. Now the next thing that I need to tell you about is that the EMF induced in a conducting rod of length L rotating with the angular speed omega about one of its ends in the uniform perpendicular magnetic field is given by half B omega L square. Okay, so you should make a note of this. You can even find this out using this function, using this. Okay, and integrating this over the entire length of the conductor. And the next thing that I want you to notice, the EMF between the center and the edge of the disk of the radius R rotating in a magnetic field is given by B omega R square by 2. Let's try out another question. A rod PQ of length L moves with the uniform velocity V parallel to a long straight wire carrying a current I. The end P remaining at the distance R from the wire. So let us just draw what is given in the question. You have a current carrying wire and you have a rod here. This is PQ, this is the current I, this is the length element dx. Okay, and this distance is nothing but small x. Okay, now the next thing is calculate the EMF induced across the rod. Take V is equal to 5 meter per second and I is equal to 100 amps. R is 1 centimeter and L is 19 centimeter. Now the rod PQ is moving in the magnetic field produced by the current carrying long wire. Now we know that the field of this wire is not uniform throughout the length of the rod because it changes with distance. Okay, so let us consider a small element dx that I mentioned here at a distance x from the wire. Now if the magnetic field at the position of dx is given by B, okay, then the EMF induced at that point is B into dx is nothing but mu naught I by 2 pi x into V dx. Okay, therefore the EMF is induced in the entire length of the rod PQ. To find that, what we do is we just integrate it. So my EMF is nothing but the integral of dE, which is nothing but an integral from P to Q of mu naught by 2 pi I by x into dx into V dx. Okay, given this, we know that at x is equal to R, this corresponds to P, and x is equal to R plus L corresponds to the point q. Okay, thus I can easily write that epsilon is nothing but mu naught I v by 2 pi. It is r2 r plus l dx by x. Now the integral of 1 by x is log x, so this is equal to mu naught iv by 2 pi log base e x going from r to r plus l, which is nothing but mu naught iv by 2 pi log r plus l by r. Okay, now if we just put the given values, we find that my EMF becomes equal to 3 into 10 to the power minus 4 volts. Let's solve another question. A wheel with 10 metallic spokes, each of length 0.5 meter, is rotated with an angular speed of 120 revolutions per minute in a plane normal to the Earth's magnetic field. If the Earth's magnetic field at the given place is 0.4 cos, find the EMF induced between the axle and the rim of the wheel. Okay, so let's see how to do this question. First of all, I can write my angular velocity as 2 pi times n, which is nothing but 2 pi times 120 by 60, okay, is equal to 4 pi. So this is my first equation. Next, it is given that the magnetic field is nothing but 0.4 Gauss, which is basically meaning that it is equal to 4 into 10 to the minus 5 Tesla. Okay, and length of each spoke, length is given as 0.5 meter. Now we know that the induced EMF for the rotating rod is half B omega L square. Now I can easily substitute the values that have been given to me in the question. So I get the value as half into 4 into 10 to the power minus 5 into 4 pi into 0.5 whole square. Okay, this reduces my equation down to EMF is equal to 6.28 into 10 raised to the power minus 5 volts. Okay, now as all the 10 spokes are connected with their one end at the axle and the other end at the rim, so they are connected in parallel, hence the EMF across each spoke is the same. Okay, so the number of spokes is immaterial in the question. Let us look at another question. A thin semicircular conducting ring of radius r is falling with its plane vertical in a horizontal magnetic induction B. At the position m and q, the speed of the ring is v. What is the potential difference developed across the ring at the position m and q? So in order to do this question, let us assume that the ring is falling through an infinitesimal small distance dx in a time dt. So to do this, let's first draw what this really means. I'll draw this with another pen to make it more clear. So this was your initial position m, n and q. Okay, let it fall down by some distance dx. So this is the distance dx by which it falls down, and this leads to a new position m prime, n prime and q prime. So in a time dt, it fell down by this much distance. Okay, so first of all, we can easily find the change in the area, of this ring which was inside the magnetic field. So change in area is nothing but whatever is right here. Okay, you need to subtract this from the original area. So my dA is nothing but negative of m q q prime m prime. So you have the m q q prime and m prime, so we have to subtract this area. Okay, note that these points are extremely close, so I'm just calling this point as O. and this point as M, because it has drawn by infinitesimal length. Okay. Now what do I know? This M prime and Q prime is nothing but 2 times R, 2 times the radius already. So I can write that this area can be written as minus 2 times R into dx. Okay, so it's dx into minus 2R. With this in place, I can easily find the change in the magnetic flux linked with the ring. So what is the magnetic flux, change in magnetic flux? d phi is equal to b dot dA. Okay, and this is nothing but b dot minus 2R 2R dx, okay, is equal to minus 2br dx. Okay, now the potential difference that will be developed across the ring will be, let's say it's E or epsilon. The EMF is minus d phi by dt. The induced EMF is nothing but minus 2br into dx by dt, which is nothing but 2 times b r v. Okay, and you should also note that the speed with which the ring will be falling is v is equal to dx by dt. Next, let's talk about self-induction. When the current through the coil changes, the magnetic flux linked with the coil also changes. Due to the change of the flux, there is a current induced in the coil which itself opposes the change in the magnetic flux. Okay, or it tries to oppose the change in the current in the system. Okay, this phenomena will be known as self-induction, and the factor by the virtue of which the coil shows opposition to this change is known as the coefficient of self-inductance of the coil. So I've shown you a coil here, and we have there is a current passing through the system. So first of all, this is a solenoid. Okay. Now when the current through the coil is constant, if I is equal to constant, we find that there is that phi is equal to constant. Okay, now if phi is equal to constant, that implies there is no electromagnetic induction in the coil. Okay, I can easily define my total flux of the coil, which is n phi. So total flux of the coil is nothing but n phi. Okay, and this is proportional to the current through the coil. Okay, given this, I can easily write that the n phi is proportional to I, or n phi is equal to L times I. So I can write n into phi of the total flux is equal to L into I, where L will be known as your inductance or self-inductance. So I have given the form of the L here. L is equal to n phi by I, or n into BA by I, or the net flux divided by I. Okay, this is the case for when the current is constant. Next, when the current is variable or the current is changing with respect to time, we find that the current through the coil will also change, and thus my EMF which is induced is equal to minus L times di by dt. Okay, so you should definitely take a note of both these quantities. Okay, note that the self-inductance L is a constant of the coil, and it does not depend on the current that flows through the coil. Okay, this ES will be known as the self-induced EMF of the coil, and let's talk about some self-induced EMFs. So the first one is that of a plane coil. So for a plane coil, the total magnetic flux linked with n turns is what? So total magnetic flux is n times BA, which is n times mu naught Ni by 2R into A, okay, which can be written as mu naught n square I by 2R, okay, into pi R square, which is nothing but mu naught n square into pi into R by 2. But we already know that phi is equal to L into I, so this quantity becomes my L, which is given here. So you should definitely make a note of the self-inductance of a plane coil, okay. The next one that we look at is self-inductance of a solenoid. Now for a solenoid we can easily find the total flux. So the total flux is n times mu naught Ni divided by L into A is nothing but mu naught n square A by L into I, okay. But as phi is equal to L times I, so I can easily write that my L becomes mu naught n square A by L, or Lm is equal to mu naught mu R n square A by L, okay. You can go down and talk to you about what mutual induction is. So whenever the current passing through the primary coil or coil number 1, whenever the current is passing through the primary coil or circuit changes, then the magnetic flux between the neighboring coils also change. So if this is the primary coil, this is the primary coil, and this is the secondary coil. So if the current through these coils change, that will induce a EMF in the second coil. Similarly, if the current in this coil changes, it will induce a EMF in the first coil, okay. So again, according to the Lenz's law, an EMF induced in the neighboring coil will be such that it opposes the change in the net change of flux in the system, okay. And there will be multiple cases in this. Let me discuss two cases. The first case is when the current through the primary coil is constant. So if I is equal to constant, okay, I is this. So if the current through the primary coil is constant, okay, then the total flux of secondary is directly proportional to the current flowing through the primary coil. So what we have is N2 phi 2 is directly proportional to the current flowing in the first one. So it's proportional to I1, okay, and that implies I can write my N2 phi 2 is equal to M times I1, okay. With this in the picture, I can easily define my coefficient of mutual inductance, okay. So for a coil I can write, I'll just write it right around here. So I just need to substitute for what phi is. So my M is nothing but N2 into phi 2 divided by I1, N2 into phi 2 divided by current in the first coil, okay, is nothing but N2 into B2 into A2 divided by I1, which is nothing but total flux in the secondary coil divided by I current in the primary coil, okay. So this is the formula for coefficient of mutual inductance: total flux in the secondary coil by current in the primary coil. This is, you can have two of these. You can take one as the primary coil and the second as the secondary coil, or you can reverse these things. For both the cases, the mutual inductance will be the same, okay. You should also note then in the case 2, when the current through the primary coil is changing with respect to time, okay. So in this case, my N2 phi 2 is equal to Mi, and that implies that the EMF induced in the secondary coil is equal to mutual inductance, coefficient of mutual inductance into the rate of change of current in the primary coil. So this is also extremely important, and we'll be using this later. Another thing that you should notice something about coupling. So if you have two coils that are close to each other, and the first coil has coefficient of self-inductance as L1, the second one has a coefficient of self-inductance as L2. Similarly, the first one has and both of them have the coefficient of mutual inductance as M. Then M can be written as K times root of L1 plus L2, K times root of L1 L2. Okay, this is the condition where this is the first coil attached to some circuit, and then you have another coil attached to some circuit. Okay, and this has inductance L1, this has inductance L2, and the mutual inductance is M. Then you have the factor K, which is known as the coupling factor between the two coils. Okay, so K is that constant. Sometimes you will be asked about the coupling factor between them. So given the values of M, L1 and L2, you can easily find this out. So, and also mark this with a star. So let's look at some specific examples. The first example that we'll look at is that of two coaxial solenoids. Okay, so for two coaxial solenoids with turns N1 and N2, we see that the coefficient of mutual inductance is given by mu naught N1 N2 A by L, where L is the length of the solenoid. Okay. Next, you should also note that if I take two plane concentric shells, my mutual inductance coefficient is given by mu naught N1 N2 pi r square divided by 2 into R1. Okay, where R1 and R2 are the two radii, and N1 and N2 are the number of turns in both the concentric shells. Okay, with this in mind, we look at the mutual inductance in the case of two concentric circular loops. So the only thing that you need to know from here is that it is proportional to R2 square by R1. Okay, when R1 is very much greater than R2. You can derive these things as well, but I think you should just make a small note of these. Derivation is quite simple. You just do the same thing, flux to the second coil with respect to the change in flux in the first coil, and then you can easily write it for a case of two concentric square loops as well. So if you have an outer loop of side A and the inner loop of side B, then mutual inductance is proportional to B square by A. Note this is similar to the case of R2 square by R1. Okay. Similarly, you can write it for a square and a circular loop. It is again M is proportional to R square by A, where R is the radius of the inner circle. So these are essential points that you should make a small note of. Next, let's talk about inductance in series and parallel. So if you have two inductors in series, first of all, let me tell you what an inductor looks like in a circuit. It is given by this diagram. Let this have a inductance L1, this has an inductance L2, and the coefficient of mutual inductance between them be M. Okay, so if the current in both the coils is flowing in the same direction, okay, in that case what you have is your net inductance is equal to L1 plus L2 plus 2 times M. However, if the current is flowing in the opposite direction, then although the L1 and L2 will still add up, but you need to subtract the mutual inductance and the twice of that quantity. So this is where they try to trick you in the paper, so you should definitely make a note of what happens when. Okay, and again this utilizes the point that mutual inductance is equal to K times root L1 L2. Okay, where K was the coupling factor. You should also note that K always lies between 0 and 1. Okay, for ideal coupling we have K max is equal to 1, and for real coupling it lies between 0 and 1. Okay, for the parallel connection of two coils, I can easily write that the net inductance is given by 1 by L1 plus M plus 1 by L2 plus M. So you should also make a quick note of this quantity. Let's talk about the energetics of inductors. As I already mentioned, an inductor is represented by a symbol like this. Okay, the energy that is stored in the inductor is given by U is equal to half into Li square. Okay, let me compare this with a capacitor. So the energy of a capacitor was stored in the electrical field between the plates. Now in the case of the inductor, the capability of storing the energy is in the magnetic field inside the inductor. Okay, so an increasing current in the inductor will cause an EMF between its terminals. Similarly, you can find the power E, which is the work done per unit time, dW by dt, which turns out to be minus Li di by dt. So you should definitely make a note of this. Also, what you should remember is when the inductor is present in a circuit, okay, at that time the potential that drops when you go from a position A to B is given by minus L times di by dt. So the potential drop is equal to minus L times di by dt. Note that the potential across this depends on whether the current is increasing in the circuit or whether the current is decreasing in the circuit. So for the general form, you just mark it as minus L di by dt. Now if the current is increasing in the circuit, okay, so our di by dt is positive, then the drop will be in the negative thing, so you will have this case. However, if the current is decreasing in the circuit, then you will get a positive sign outside. In this question, you are given that a copper wire is wound on a wooden frame whose shape is in the form of a equilateral triangle. So the shape is given by an equilateral triangle. Okay, done. Next, what is given? If the linear dimension of each side of the frame is increased by a factor of 3, keeping the number of turns of the coil per unit length of the frame the same, then what will be the self-inductance of the coil? Okay, as first of all, as we know that the total length L of the wire remains constant. So if this is the side of length A, then I have L is equal to 3A into the number of loops that are there. Okay, where N is the number of loops or the number of turns, and the length of a winding nothing but D times N. Okay, where D is the diameter of the wire. Now the self-inductance is given by mu naught N square A into L, okay, which is nothing but mu naught N square root 3A square by 4 into D into N. Now we see that this is proportional to, that the self-inductance is proportional to A square N, which is proportional to A, okay, as because N is equal to L by 3 into A, or sorry, L by 3A. N is equal to L by 3 times A, and implies N is inversely proportional to 1 by A. Okay, now we see that A is increased to 3A. Okay, now A is increased to 3A, so self-inductance will become 3 times. So L will become 3 times. So let's see how the transformer works. The transformers basically regulates the AC voltage and transfers the electrical power without changing the frequency of input supply. Okay. Some special points that you should note about a transformer are that it can't work with a DC supply or if a battery is connected to the primary. It can't be called amplifier as it has no power gain like transistor. Also, there are no moving parts inside the transformer. Now you have two types of transformers. One is the step up transformer and one is the step down transformer. So for the step up transformer, you have the number of turns in the secondary coil is greater than the number of turns in the primary coil. Okay. And for a step down transformer, I have number of turns in the primary coil is greater than number of turns in the secondary coil. Okay. Now let's see what really happens in this system. First of all, you should note that you give an AC as an input right over here to the primary coil. Okay. And what this does is there is a flux linked to the coils that are present on the primary. Okay. Now what will happen is due to the flux here or the current here, there will be a change in current in the primary coils. This will induce a current or an EMF in the secondary coils. Okay, due to the mutual inductance between the two coils, and this will generate a EMF which is denoted by ES. Here the EMF is denoted by EP. What you notice for a step up transformer, number of turns in the secondary coil is greater than number of turns in the primary coil. Also, the EMF generated in the secondary coil is greater than the EMF in the primary coil. Next thing that you should notice, this will be the case for step down transformer. Okay, but during the working you should always remember that ES by EP is equal to NS by NP is equal to IP by IS. So this takes care of the different kinds of currents that will be induced. What will be the how do you change the number of turns and get a desired value of current as the output? So this relation, which I'll mark as 1, will take care of everything that is there. So the basic idea is in a step up transformer, it converts a low voltage high current into a high voltage low current. In the step down transformer, it converts a high voltage low current into a low voltage high current. Okay, you should always know that the power transmission that is generally through the power lines, okay, it is carried at a high voltage low current. Okay, so that the voltage drop and power losses can be minimized through the transmission line. You should also note that in the transmission line, the current that should be there is equal to the power of transmission divided by the line voltage. Okay, so the power losses for this can be easily written as power losses can be written as IL square into RL. Okay, you should note that the high voltage coil has more number of turns and always is made of a thin wire, whereas the high current coil has a less number of turns and is always made of thick wires. Okay. There are real transformers and then there are ideal transformers, but we will not look into much detail. This is all you need to know. This is all you need to know in order to attempt the questions. Next, we quickly look at the RL circuits that are there. So we'll as we talked about RC circuits on how the current increases in the circuit and how it decays. Similarly, we'll talk about the current growth and current decay in a RL circuit. So here in the diagram, I've connected a inductor L, a resistance R, battery with a providing an EMF E, and there is a current in the system. So let's talk about this. First of all, let me just write the EMF equation. The EMF equation is nothing but epsilon or E is equal to IR plus L di by dt. Okay, this is the EMF equation. So you should make a note of this. You can easily do this by using the Kirchhoff's law and noting that the potential drop across L is equal to L into di by dt. Okay, so first of all, I look at the current at an instant. So when the key is closed here, when I close this key here, the current in the circuits increases exponentially with respect to time, which is given by this formula where lambda is equal to L by R. Okay, at t is equal to 0, what we have is I is equal to 0. At t is equal to infinity, we have at t is equal to infinity, we have I is equal to its maximum value I naught. So you should make a note of this. Okay, so let's talk a little more about this. Just after we close the key, the inductance behaves like an open circuit and the current in the circuit is 0. Okay, so for the open circuit, which I mentioned, I is equal to 0. Some time after closing the key, inductance behaves like a simple connected wire. So an inductance behaves like a short circuit. Okay, so it behaves like a short circuit, and the current in the circuit becomes constant. Okay, so after the time that the inductor is charged up, or basically after a time t is equal to infinity or a very large time, we see that the current in the system becomes constant. Okay, this current is nothing but E by R, because I can replace this inductor L by a simple wire. What you should note from here is the time constant of the circuit, which is given by lambda. It is the time in which the current increases up to 63% of its total value. Time till which it reaches the 63% value. Next is half-life. Half-life is easier to calculate. It's again the half-life is 0.693 into lambda. 0.693 into lambda. These are just some nomenclature and some definitions that you need to remember. Okay, so I've already mentioned all these points before. You can even find the rate of growth of current at any instant by calculating the di by dt. So di by dt is E by L into e to the power minus t by lambda. Okay, that implies when t is equal to 0, di by dt will be maximum. From here you can easily write when t is equal to 0, then this quantity will be maximum, and when t is equal to infinity or at a very large time, this quantity goes to 0. This is what you should remember, that what happens at steady state and what happens when nothing has started. The next is about the current decay in the system. First of all, you just look at this graph. This is telling you about the current growth in the system. Okay, this is the value of lambda, where you get 0.63 I naught as the current. Next is talking about current decay. So the equation, this is my circuit. If I try to write the EMF equation, it is IR plus L di by dt is equal to 0. Let me see what happens here. Once the current acquires its final maximum steady value, which was I naught, if suddenly I pull out the switch, okay, then the current starts decreasing exponentially with respect to time. So it starts decreasing exponentially with respect to time. Okay, at the switch put off condition, which is t is equal to 0, I get I is equal to I naught, which was the initial condition. Now because of this, my source of EMF is cut off from the circuit. Okay, so I again have the time constant as lambda, which is the time in which the current decreases up to 37%. And half-life is the time in which the current decreases up to 50% of its peak value. You can easily look at the decay rate. So for the decay rate, you need to find minus di by dt. Okay, so minus di by dt is the decay rate of current at any instant, is equal to E by L into e to the power minus t by lambda. Okay, so we find that at t is equal to 0, this quantity is maximum, which is equal to E by L. Okay, and at t is equal to infinity, or for t large, I find this quantity goes to 0. Okay, so these things you should remember. What is basically happening is, after we disconnect the battery, okay, what happens is this inductor will provide for the energy and the current in the system. It will start losing whatever potential energy it stored. Its potential energy was half Li square. So using this potential energy, it will provide the current in the system. Let's take a brief look at another question. A power transmission line feeds input power at 2300 volts to a step-down transformer with its primary windings having 4000 turns. The output power is delivered at 230 volts by the transformer. If the current in the primary of the transformer is 5 ampere and its efficiency is 90%, the output current would be what? Okay, so first of all, let's note what efficiency really means. So my efficiency of a transformer, which is denoted by eta, is nothing but the P power out by power in. First of all, I want you to make a note of this formula. Now we know that power out is nothing but V of secondary into I of secondary divided by V of primary into I of primary. Okay, that implies 0.9 is equal to 230 into I of secondary divided by 2300 into 5, which basically implies that IS is nothing but 0.9 into 50 is equal to 45 ampere. Therefore, the output current is 45 amperes. Next, we look at another question. A 20 Henry inductor coil is connected to a 10 ohm resistance in series as shown in the figure. The time at which the rate of dissipation of energy across the resistance is equal to the rate at which the magnetic energy stored in the inductor is what? Okay, so how do I do this? We are basically talking about the power. So I have I square R is equal to tau into di by dt into I. Okay, that implies di by dt is nothing but I by tau. Okay, that implies T is equal to tau ln 2 is equal to 2 times ln 2. Why? Because tau is nothing but L by R, which is the time constant. It's nothing but 1020 by 10 is equal to 2. So using that, your answer turns out to be 2 times ln